I hope you are excited about finishing the course. I'm sure you are. All right. Um, how much economic news do you follow? Do you read newspapers?
Not newspapers, but I'll look on like Yahoo Finance for some news because on the platform they have news as well as the stock performance.
Yeah, the culture of reading newspapers is fading fast. I mean, when I don't read newspaper as such, but I do follow news through social media. And like I have, uh, what do we call FYP, right? And FYP, right? Yeah, your feed, right? I have like made it in such a way that I get a lot of news from that. So, President Trump announced a big decision 2 days ago. Did anybody follow? What did he say?
Oh, was it the banning of firms buying single family homes? So like BlackRock and Blackstone, like their stocks dropped like I think it was like 10+% on Wednesday.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Very good. Great. You read a lot. It shows in your answers and your active participation that you are um, you know a big reader. Uh, Let me share what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I would encourage all of you to be avid readers and follow economic and finance news or news in general as well, but from multiple sources because most of the media houses today have some bias towards one either this way or that way, right? So this is what Robert was telling us. So I'm immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes, and I'll be calling on Congress to codify it. And another political leader won election recently on this wave, exactly this topic. Who was he? On housing. Housing was a major issue in his election campaign.
Well, was it Mamdani in New York?
Yeah, yeah. What did he say?
This I'm a little less familiar, but I believe it was like trying to add like rent ceilings so that, it would be a lot more affordable for people who are trying to rent and, not get, scammed kind of by like landlords.
Right. So his economic policies were rent freezes. I mean, I'll come to his other economic policies as well. But what does President Trump mean by this? Or Zohran Mamdani, as he said, that he wants to solve. He claimed that he would try to solve housing crisis. Right. So what do you know? What happens when these institutional investors or corporations buy individual houses? How does that lead to housing crisis? Can somebody explain in like steps, like how does like help us visualize how it happens? Any idea? So what I have heard, um, whatever my little knowledge tells me is that suppose uh, a builder announces housing society, 100 homes in central Manhattan, each house $1 million. He says that it will take about 2 years to construct the houses, and after 2 years, people can start moving in. All right. Now, an institutional investor immediately steps in and buys houses for $1 million. Then another institutional investor comes and he says that we want to buy the house from you. We will give you $2 million for the house. So initially, when the builder had announced the house, he had priced it at $1 million, which means that the facilities, the infrastructure, and everything that you are getting is worth $1 million. That is the valuation, right? Now, it got bought by another institutional investor or corporation or somebody for $2 million within 3 months, but nothing tangible was added to the house. No real value was added to the house, right? It is the same house, right? It's not that if he's buying it for $2 million, he would add something to it. And he's going to sell that to somebody else for, say, $5 million, again, without adding anything worth value to the house. And the chain goes on. And ultimately, 2 years later, uh, when the time is for moving in, it becomes, I don't know, $10 million or $15 million, something like that, which is not its actual value. It's an inflated value. Do you see what is happening? Right? So that is how this buying by institutional investors from individual homes leads to housing crisis. Now it's way beyond a common people's reach, right? Talking of economic policies of Zohran Namdani, so he said, um, one, he talked about freezing the rents, right? Does anybody remember other economic policies that he had announced? Did he say something about transportation or other public services?
He said that
Didn't
he
he say he
wanted.
wanted buses to be like free or something?
Yes, he would make buses free, transit free. Yes, Ashwarya, you're saying something.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing that he was trying to make public transport free.
Hmm. Hmm. What do you think
Also,
about
like city-run convenience stores
running convenience stores, running
or like
government,
supermarkets.
yes, running public stores, yes,
Doesn't he also
yes.
believe in universal childcare?
Childcare, free childcare, yes, very important part of, I mean, very important announcement. Yes, right. Anything else? What do you what do you feel about these policies? Let's discuss one by one. uh, Tackling housing crisis. That is, he said something like he will build 20,000 more houses and freeze rents. What do you feel about that?
I highly doubt that's gonna happen because he offers no incentive to like landlords and to like people that are renting out their space.
Hmm. Okay. What about free transit, free transportation?
I think the free tr public transit is something that's definitely going to boost the city in terms of like transit has steadily increased at least I know like public transit in New York and obviously New Jersey for trains and buses that go into New York has steadily increased. Like fares have increased every summer. So I definitely think that would be a good thing if he's able to pull it off. Um, but that's the only thing is whether or not he'll be able to pull it off.
Okay.
I'd like to add, I think with like the public transportation, I think a lot of problems will come into effect. Like a lot of like small businesses and like individual workers, they all will get affected, like Uber and stuff. but I think it's still better for the environment though.
Yeah, I did not think that way. Yeah, Uber, it's going to hurt. Yeah, I was going to discuss something else regarding public transport, but you raise a very good point that it's going to affect Uber driver. I mean, cab drivers. Right, yes, yes. I did not incorporate that factor while considering it. Good, good. What about running public grocery stores or convenience stores?
I think it would be like helpful to the community, but there would be like a lot of challenges too, because having those like public stores, um, it might not be able to like compete with, other stores like bigger stores, say something like a Stop and Shop or a ShopRite or some other grocery store with like prices and whatnot. So it might have trouble competing.
Right, right. The biggest question that we should ask is that he's announcing so many elaborate policies, free public transport, running uh, running grocery stores and all, building so much infrastructure and all. How is he going to finance all this? How is he going to finance all this? And especially when you are at loggerheads with the federal government, and federal government will may most likely, stop the funding to New York City, although the federal grant that New York City receives from federal government is not a very high percentage of its budget. It's just 6 to 7%. It's just $8 billion or something out of $120 billion. So it's not a very big amount. But still, how are you going to fund all this if you are not taking any money from customers for riding public buses? How are you going to get money?
Probably through
And
taxes.
so yeah, he said higher corporate taxes and 2%
Mm-hmm.
surcharge on millionaires if millionaires decide to stay in New York City, because there was news that a lot of them are thinking of leaving, like what has been happening in California. So, that is the question that he needs to answer, right? This, I would say that out of all his public policies, the most, the policy that I was impressed the most was with is this free childcare, because it's a very big issue.
That's impossible.
Uh, Yeah, I personally find this the best because considering the nose diving birth rates of US, if you want to encourage people to have more kids, then you need to incentivize childcare. They should be able to raise their child uh cheaper and in a more comfortable way. Although managing kids still remains a question, because there's a saying in English that it takes a village to raise a kid, and in present day culture of nuclear families and single parents and all, it's very difficult. But anyway, this personally, I mean, from an economic point of view, it doesn't make sense. It's going to, I mean, it's going to kill other stores, and it will lead to a lot of job losses. And yeah, government should not be in business. There's a saying that there's no business of government to be in the business. And this,
Professor, I have a quick
yes.
question. So for the Trump law that he passed, is that for like the whole US or just New York for single family homes?
What did you say?
Is that for New York only or is that for the whole US for single family homes?
I think that is for the whole US.
Okay. So then the Mamdani is just for New York though, right?
Yeah, yeah. Mamdani's policies will just affect NYC, but what President Trump announced is going to be implemented in the whole US. Then this one. What do you feel about this one?
Uh, I think it's kind of the most impossible one in my opinion. Like $30 is a really huge step. Like if it was like $22, I can kind of see that, but I think $30 is just a lot for like minimum, like and that's for minimum wage. That could be like a job that I don't really think the labor can add up to $30 an hour. It might like kill businesses, like small ones.
It will kill businesses. It will completely kill businesses. I don't think he can do that. I
You,
don't
I,
think
you know,
he.
too.
I don't think he can do any of them, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, public trans. Yeah, um,
I
I think he
think
should definitely do this. Yeah, yeah, Ethan.
I think like city-run grocery stores is possible. Like as long as it's maintained as a business and the profits are like break even and it's nonprofit, I think like some of his policies are realistic and beneficial. But then I think a lot of them, like not a lot of them, like a few of them are kind of very far-fetched and impossible.
Hmm. You're right. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to uh, do welfare. It's good. It's obviously everybody. Um, everybody encourages welfare. We want to see welfare, but the question still remains that how are you going to fund these projects, right? That remains the biggest question. And if there are 10 things and you are not able to, you cannot fund 10 all the 10 projects, then you need to prioritize and tell people that which of these projects would be your first and second and third priority, because you will ultimately have to skip a few of them, right? According to me, the childcare one should be the topmost priority, and transit and grocery stores can maybe take a back seat. Housing should be then probably maybe second priority, and that is just my opinion. Of course, you can have different opinions. Everybody has different priorities. Everybody thinks in different way. So yeah, I just wanted to discuss this because found it really interesting. Because ultimately, you have to govern the city, and your people generally make opinion on the basis of social policies, but we should also give importance to the economic policies as well. And I'm not saying whether these policies are good or bad. I just wanted to discuss them through completely economic point of view, right? So let's start um, our chapter 8, which is internationalization, international strategy, I mean. Did all of you take international business before taking BPS? Or no? Hmm. So it's not, because I guess for many of you, the major is computer science or something like that, right? So you're not exactly business major. So I guess that is why it was not compulsory for you. Because if your major is business, then IB is a core course. Besides BPS, of course, BPS is a core course. So probably that is why. So, what is the basic unit of international strategy or international business? The basic unit is a multinational firm, right? Which we sometimes call MNC, multinational corporation, or MNE. which is multinational enterprise, right? The both mean the same thing. But how do we define an MNC or MNE? So, say if I buy a few stocks on Singapore Stock Exchange of a firm, do I also become an MNC or MNE? I don't, right? Even though I have. I mean, because if I bought stock, which means I am part owner, I'm partial owner of the firm, right? But that does not make me an MNC. So US defines it as 10% ownership stake, but it varies with each country. Some countries define at 15%, 20%. So if you have that much ownership in a foreign company, then it is you are an MNC basically, right? And the countries in which companies headquarters office is not located are called host countries. So Microsoft Brazil, okay, Microsoft would have a fully owned subsidiary in Brazil, of which it would have 100% ownership, and Brazil would be host country for Microsoft, while US would be home country, right? And despite the attractiveness of foreign markets, you would see that still very high number of firms do not internationalize at all. Like they don't have any office, although their products may still be exported. Especially nowadays, you can buy any product of any country from any, I mean, sitting in anywhere in the world. So yeah, you can buy any product anywhere. So exports are of course there, but they do not have any physical presence in outside their home country. So let's see a few theories about international strategy, internationalization. First is product life cycle theory, which explained how and when products or firms internationalize, and they tell both direction as well as the rate of flow of the product. So he said that, I mean, he said this in 1960s. So at that time, most of the new innovations, most of the new products were launched in US. I mean, in the Western countries, but even in the West, more in US than Europe or Australia, right? So say, radio or VCRs was launched. Do you understand VCR? Right. Elena understands. Others. Okay. So VCR was like grandfather of DVDs or CDs, like parent generation back in 1980s and 90s. So say suppose a new product is launched, announced, then sl- initially the demand would be less because it's expensive, not everybody can afford it, people are not familiar with it. But slowly its demand increases when it becomes popular. Then it reaches the maturing product stage. That is, more competitors have now started making it. So initially there was just one firm which launched it, which produced the first product, right? But now seeing that more competitors have entered the market, it starts getting exported to the rest of the world. And now, because there are so many options in the market, uh, the differentiation aspect has faded, and now the primary competition is based on the cost of the product. Okay, and price becomes the main factor of competition now. So to cut the cost, firms shift their production base to developing nations. So, say VCR was launched in 1970s, by 1980s it become common, and uh, companies thought that now we should start producing it somewhere else. So maybe they would shift their production from US to Mexico. But all right, we have to cut costs because now there are so many rivals in the market who are also producing VCRs. So let's move the production to a cheaper location like Mexico or Brazil or somewhere else, right? So, and by the time Brazil and Mexico they start producing VCR, the parent firm who had initially launched VCR has now moved on to producing CD. Okay, but now because they have been working on new innovation, right? So initially low sales, high cost per customer, then increases sales, more competitors, and here the firm would internationalize and move the production to some low cost location. So the country which had actually given birth to that product becomes an importer of the same product in this stage. So initially, VCR was getting exported from US to the rest of the world, but in maturity stage, US would start importing VCRs from Mexico or Brazil or some other location because now the sole point of competition is price. And by that time, US firms have already started working on next generation of product, which is CD or DVDs, right? And the cycle continues. Then same CD and DVD will get launched. They would become common over the years, and then they would be produced in, say, China or Vietnam. And then by that time, US firms would be working on pen drives or USB drives, right? You see what is the cycle of the product? Now, we see this product life cycle uh, in East Asia in something called flying geese paradigm. So you must have seen these geese flying in a V-shaped manner, in flock, and it's led by a leader, right? And again, we are talking about uh, 1960s, all right? So that time, China had not opened up. China was still going through Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap, was still under Mao. Only in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping decided to open, only then China started progressing very fast, right? So what happened? They showed through evidence that um, in East Asia, Japan was the most developed country, despite being bombed nuclearly in Second World War. But still, it had started progressing very fast from late 40s itself. And Japan would say start a garment factory. Again, the same thing, product life cycle theory. Uh, Japan, the production of garment would move from Japan to newly industrializing economies. NIE means newly industrializing economies. So at that time, there were a popular phrase called Asian tigers and Asian cubs. So cub is the child of tiger, right? So the four Asian tigers were Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, which were very fast developing nations. Okay. And cub economies were Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, who were a little slow but they were also trying to catch up. So from Japan, the production would move to one of the, say, tiger economies, say Taiwan or South Korea or Hong Kong, and Japan would start working on more complex product like steel. Okay, the same product life cycle theory would take place with the steel, and Japan would move to. We know Japanese have been very great at electronic products, right? So they would start producing TVs, and then these countries, tiger economies, when they would gain expertise in these products, they would move their production to curb economies, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. Right. So China is now a leader in tech, new innovations, deep seek, and whatnot. But it did not directly jump to high, high skilled industries. Right. It started with low end products in 80s and 90s. That is how it became manufacturing hub, right? And then it slowly moved to the territory stage, right? So these scholars showed that this product life cycle theory is very much evident in East Asia, with Japan leading the flock, right? The problem with this theory is, I mean, this is really good theory, but problem is that it was valid for 1960s and 70s and 80s, because at that time most of the innovations used to take place only in few countries like US, and in East Asia it was Japan, or somewhere in Europe it would be Western Europe. But now innovations are coming from different countries. Today it does not happen that innovations take place in only Western world or a few countries. But say even Google's Philippines office might come up with something very path-breaking, or even local firm, not necessarily Google in Philippines, but even a local Filipino firm can come up with something really revolutionary, right? And it's not able to explain born global and born digital firms. What is born global and born digital firms? So born global firm is which, when it is born, it is not born in just one nation, but multiple nations. So if I decide to open, say, some tape making firm, adhesive tape or glue, but I say that, the very first day, my operations would not just be in US or in India, but it would be in five different nations. I will sell to Mexico as well. I will sell to Canada as well. And in Indian subcontinent, I will sell to India as well as Nepal as well as Sri Lanka. So it's a born global firm, right? Because from the very first day, it's not limited to just one country, but multiple countries. And born digital firm is when you are basically your products are more intangible than tangible. If you are mainly working through e-commerce or digital platforms, then it's obvious that it's easier for you to cater to a global audience than a domestic audience. So born digital firms would generally be born global as well. So that does not comply with the product lifecycle theory, because today innovations are taking place and products are getting birth, not just few parts of the world, but everywhere in the world, right? And what are the reasons for, or what are the motives for internationalization? So there's another theory called eclectic paradigm or OLI framework. OLI is ownership, location, and internalization, and it's also called eclectic paradigm. It was given by a British economist, John Dunning. Have you heard the name John Dunning? No? Does John Dunning have anything to do with you guys? So John Dunning was a British person initially at University of Reading, but then later he came to US and opened international business department at Rutgers Business School, Newark. Newark campus though. You're all from New Brunswick campus, I guess, but I am at Newark campus. Right? So that building, uh, the department in that building was founded by John Dunning. And then it was later taken over by Professor John Cantwell, who was his PhD student at University of Reading. Then John Cantwell also came to uh, US and joined Rutgers Business School, Department of International Business. He was head of the department as well. And just last year, Professor John Cantwell retired in August. So yeah, John Dunning has to do with you guys. So he gave this theory. He's like considered one of the fathers, like the father or founder of international business. And he said that there are mainly three reasons why firms internationalize. One is ownership, which means consider this to exploit your ownership advantage. What does that mean? So I've seen in India, I've seen in China as well. People are crazy for Apple products. Okay, mainly because they attach it with like status symbol, or they see it as some elite thing. Okay, also because of its quality, of course. They were once Apple products were superior to others. So now, if Apple knows that my products are very popular in other parts of the world, but I don't have any presence there. My phones and my laptops only get exported to China, India, and other countries, but Apple does not have any office or manufacturing facility in those parts of the world. But it sees that its product sales are growing every year in China and India. So, what would it think? Should it not exploit its ownership advantage? I mean, there are millions of customers there. The location is also cheap. They're popular. You can sell. I mean, right now, many people don't buy Apple phones in those parts of the world because they are very expensive. But if you start making them there itself, you will cut prices and then more people can buy your products, right? So, exploiting your ownership advantage is the first reason. Then, location advantage. Now, location advantage could be anything. Maybe that raw material is found only in that region of the world, right? Like Venezuela or Africa or so many other places where things are found only in that place. That could be one location advantage, or it could be labor advantage as well, that the labor is cheap there. So you want to exploit the cheap labor advantage there, right? Third is internalization. Internalization is cutting transaction costs. That is uh, vertical integration. Now, that vertical integration could be either to save transaction costs from your suppliers or distributors, or it could be to save your technology from getting copied, right? Maybe your tacit advantage will go away if your you know firms in your supply chain become your competitor one day because they learned how to make your product. So he said that these are the three primary reasons why firms internationalize, and these three cover everything, all the reasons why firms internationalize, and that is why he called it eclectic paradigm. Okay. Then another reason why firms internationalize is regional block. So Have you heard this term? NAFTA or USMCA? Hmm? Do you know what is the full form of NAFTA or USMCA? NAFTA is North America Free Trade Agreement, and USMCA is just US, Mexico, and Canada agreement. Okay, USMCA is basically an updated version of NAFTA. It's the same thing, but an updated version. So many times firms internationalize because they want to exploit the advantage given to them by these regional blocks. The most popular regional bloc in the world is European Union, right? They even have same currency. We have a full chapter on regional blocks in international business course. So if you are a firm, you know, in one of these three countries, US, Mexico, and Canada, then you can get a lot of benefits, the tax cuts, the subsidies. If you are from those particular industries which are listed in these, agreements, then you can get advantage. And then it is shown that firms who diversify within the region and then they diversify across the regions are most successful. That is, if I'm an American firm, rather than going straight away to China or Africa or East Asia, I should first expand within the region, that is to Canada and Mexico and nearby countries, and then I should go to far off places. So, yeah, there are like conditions in these regional blocks that, like for example, in NAFTA and basically NAFTA was earlier uh, from 1994 to 2016 or 17, and then when President Trump in his first tenure, he said that NAFTA has provisions which are not favorable to US, so he asked Mexico and Canada to re-sign the agreements more in favor of US, and then he renamed it USMCA. So there are some provisions like if you are an automobile firm and you want to get some tax breaks or subsidies, then 40% of your production should be uh, within these three countries, and they should come from high labor cost factories. High labor cost factories means that at least some production should be in US. You cannot move all the production to Mexico because that would mean a lot of jobs will go away. So those kind of provisions are there that helps firms to stay within North America and not move their manufacturing abroad a lot, and gives them advantages. So why did NAFTA come into place? Uh, so there were many reasons. One was that Canadian and American firms wanted to take advantage of low cost in Mexico. And US government's rationale was that if we provide them jobs there in their own country, then it would cut illegal migration to US. They are coming to US to get jobs for a better life, but if they are able to get jobs in their own country, if we can increase the per capita income there itself, then they won't need to come here. So it was like a win-win situation for both all the three countries, and it did help. It did bring a lot of jobs because then US and Canadian firms can use Mexico as a launch pad to export their products to the rest of the world by cutting costs, and also to US, back to US and Canada as well, right? And it would increase the per capita income of Mexicans, then they would also buy more of your products. right? So it was like a very symbiotic logic there. Then let's see this example. Pankaj Ghemawat was a professor at Harvard Business School. Now he's at NYU Stone. So he said that firms sometimes get too excited to internationalize without completely thinking it through. For example, when China started growing in 70s after Deng Xiaoping took power, and it had a unbelievable growth rate in 70s, oh, sorry, 80s. Then many firms in the West thought that, wow, such a big country, millions and millions of people waiting for us to buy our products. Like they are our potential market. Let's go there and sell our products. So Star TV launched its English language programs in China back in early 90s. Think about it. We're talking about early 90s when many people did not know English there and were not very familiar with the Western culture. And it failed miserably. It lost millions of dollars. And Dr. Pankaj Ghemawat studied the case and came up with something called CAGE framework. What is CAGE? C for cultural, A for administrative, E for economic, and G for geographic. He said that when you internationalize, you should take a holistic view according to CAGE framework of the target market and not just the lucrativeness or the attractiveness of the market that okay it's a big market, it's there are millions of the population is high or they have a very high spending power. Those factors alone do not make the decision. So for example, say this Dallas based firm restaurant chain wants to expand globally. Now if you were thinking only on the lines of per capita income and fast food consumption, then you would think that, oh, Japan, Canada, and Germany would be the most promising countries. And Mexico would rank very down the list. But if you include other dimensions from the cage framework, then you would realize that Mexico is a pretty good choice because Mexico is closer to US than Japan and Germany. There's a big Latino population in US and big Mexican population in US. A lot of Mexican origin people or second generation or expat would like to become expats in Mexico because they would have family there, they would be familiar with the culture, so they wouldn't mind going to Mexico to steer your operations, your company's operations. They won't mind going to Mexico because they're already familiar with the culture, language, and everything, right? So that is how we should make the decision. And he like tried to quantify this. Say income level matters. Yes, it would give uh, some positive points to that country. Economic size matters. Okay, GDP per capita and GDP both matter. Physical distance matters. That if it is far, then negative points for the country. Physical size. How big is the country? Access to ocean, common border, common language. So though Spain is very far from South America, but they have common language and colony colonizer relationship. And countries within South America and Mexico, they have common colonizer. So like Mexico and Peru or Bolivia, they might be far, but they have common colonizer and common language, right? So he quantified all of these factors and said that That is why Star TV failed in China, because that time population in China didn't understand English very well. I mean, things have improved drastically. Now young population is much more familiar with English, and they have also spent more time abroad than that generation. But at that time, uh, the familiarity with English was almost zero, and they do not did not used to understand. Like they were not able to connect with the characters in the serial in the TV serials, right? They were not familiar with the Western culture, and they were a little home biased as well. Administrative barriers that time were very high. Even that has improved a lot in China over the years, like administrative things, and corruption has come down, all those things. So that is why Pankaj Ghemawat said that firms should not rush through the decision without thinking it through, and the decision of internationalization should be taken with a lot of consideration. Then other reasons to internationalize. Of course, economies of scale and cheap labor is one of the main reasons. Uh, Outsourcing is a very heated, debated topic, right? Then research also says that you should spread your R&D activities in a moderate number of international regions, not too many, because that it would make it hard to manage, but do not limit it to a single region as well. That is why you see nowadays. Have you heard of the term GCC? GCC. One GCC was the old GCC, Gulf. What was that? Gulf Corporation. I'm missing the second C, first C, something like that, which is a group of I guess some Middle East country, oil producing Middle East countries. But the modern GCC is Global Capability Center, which basically means, which is just a new fancy term for your R&D center, right? Which basically means that firms nowadays are building their GCC in different parts of the world. So their research is not happening just at the headquarters or the home country. So like Microsoft and Google are engaging in research in India, as well as China, as well as Brazil, as well as Nigeria, right? Wherever they feel that they get very high skilled workers, like very high skilled engineers, and where they have big market and cheap labor. In all those places, they are building their GCCs and research centers, right? So the same way, that is what research also say, like scholars, economic scholars also say. Then, yeah. So another reason, and so building on this topic of GCC and research, there is a very good example from Africa. So Africa generally gets ignored in the conversations. That the spending power is not that high and all those things. But I watched this video, and I read about it. It's a very interesting example. So say these mobile wallets. What all mobile wallets do we have in US? If I have to send money, how can I send you money? I won't, but how can I send you money? One is
Um,
Zelle,
You could do Venmo.
Venmo,
PayPal.
Zelle, PayPal,
Cash App.
Cash App,
Crypto.
crypto. Okay. Yeah, right. And if you go to what do they use in China? Do you know
Alibaba Pay or something?
what?
Alibaba Pay? Is that someone else?
No, we use
You mean
WeChat
WeChat? WeChat. Yes, yes. Right, right.
and Alipay.
Yes,
Alipay.
Alipay and WeChat. Right. In India, there is UPI, which is also a very convenient method of sending money. So these are like some different kind of innovations than US, and they are more popular and not. I wouldn't say more popular actually. I mean, these mobile wallets are pretty popular in US as well, but like there are different kind of innovation which US firms can learn from. But according to me, the most mind blowing innovation is in Africa. So I think in Kenya, yeah, it was in Kenya. So back in like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when keypad phones were more, in use, and these Android and Apple phones were not that common. They were expensive, and they were just catching up. You know, so the spending power in these regions was pretty low. So most of the people were barely able to afford the keypad phones, black and white keypad phones. But they want to do business. They want to send money. Small shopkeepers and all. They want the customers to pay them through, if they don't have cash, pay them through, this mobile wallet. It would help them. It would help their business grow. It will make things more convenient. So there's this form. I don't remember the name, but I can send you the link of that video. There's this firm, it came up with an idea of sending money through text message in keypad phone. I can send you money. I will just through my keypad phone, I can type something in text, and that will send you money from my account to your account, which was which is a mind blowing innovation, right? So that is why sub-Saharan Africa alone handles 70% of the global mobile money transactions today, uh, like 600 million users. You see? And that is what we call targeting bottom of the pyramid. There is a book and a concept given by, what is the name of the person? I'm forgetting the name. Uh, it's called Bottom of the Pyramid. Let me find the name. He's a professor at Michigan, University of Michigan. He wrote a book. Economics. C.K. Prahlad, yes. So C.K. Prahlad was a business professor at, I guess, Ross School of Business or some, I think Michigan, if I remember correctly. And he gave a concept called bottom of the pyramid. He said that, if you target, so there are two ways of targeting or positioning yourself. One is what Apple does, middle and upper class, right? But if you see a pyramid, the bottom is bigger, which means there are more people at the bottom of the pyramid. So, say if it's a country like India or Ghana, there would be some rich people. You can target your product to them. They can buy iPhones, but there would be 70% or 80% of the population who would be poor or middle class or lower middle class, and they won't be able to buy our product. But if you make your product targeting them, then it will not only help them get welfare and rise up the ladder, but you will also benefit. So, like, take for example, consider this calculation. Do you know how much profit does Apple earn on single iPhone? I think we discussed it before as well, right?
I think like 80% profit.
No, 80% is way too huge. It's way too.
It's too big.
No, yeah. I think the cost price is like $400 $500 for an iPhone, something in that range, and they sell it at 1100 1200, right? So about 50 60% maybe. Um, then say you are able to sell 10 million iPhones in a month, suppose. Okay. But this 80% of the crowd doesn't buy iPhones. They cannot. Now, if you start making $100 phone, some firm starts making $100 phone and they have very thin profit margin, say just $40 per phone, but they can sell it to 500 million people, 700 million people in Africa, South America, Asia, even some parts of Europe, maybe. So, though your per unit profit is not as high as Apple, but if you multiply it with that bottom of the pyramid number, then you can actually compete with Apple in terms of total revenues and total profit, right? Do you see the point? That is what that book is about by C.K. Prahlad. Okay, so uh, that could be one motive of internationalization, that you not only get a very big market because these countries have very high populations, but also you might get to learn something new from them, like this uh, payment method in Kenya, right? But what are some concerns in international expansion? One is what we call liability of foreignness. There will always be a bias against foreign companies and some bias towards your domestic firms. It's true for every nation, every community, every region in the even within nations there are um, biases, right? When I went to Peru in July, the people in Lima were they were, they were kind of like some people were like disliking that so many tourists go to Cusco and Andes Mountains and they get more earnings than Lima and all. So yeah, there are biases always. So that bias is here as well, the liability of foreignness, and of course challenges with an unfamiliar environment. That unfamiliar environment could be economic, administrative, legal, cultural. So political risk is potential nationalization of private assets, like nationalization of private assets is in every country when when it shifts from free market economy to communist or socialist economy. Generally, the new governments nationalize your assets, right? They will nationalize your private company. There was an example from India back in 1960s or 70s. There were like some banks or some, I think banks or some firms, and overnight the prime minister next day announced that, oh, we are nationalizing the banks. Like you don't even know that your asset can go into hands of government. That is always a threat, right? Or other political threat like Afghanistan, you know, or some other political turbulence like Iran, or some African countries or Latin American countries. So what happened in Russia is probably the best example here. So Russia had an curtain, something called Iron Curtain. Iron Curtain was basically this invisible line. I think this term was first used by a British Prime Minister, I guess. Uh, yeah, British Prime Minister Churchill. Yes, he said that everything beyond this is to the east of communist ideology, to the left is capitalist ideology. So when this Iron Curtain fell after the fall of Soviet Union in 1991, a lot of companies were nationalized by Russia. The fear that we should have more control over the market and businesses. Or in this war, Russia-Ukraine war as well, 3 years, 4 years ago, um, there was a joke that you know uh, like Starbucks, right? And there was, I don't know whether that photo was true or just a meme, but when the war started and all the American firms were forced to leave Russia, they renamed it to Starbucks. They basically nationalized those firms. Mhm. And there's always that risk, right? So if such a trade war breaks out, which we are seeing right now, it affects all the countries involved. It's not a zero sum game, right? These political tensions or trade wars are not zero sum game that, oh, Russia is losing, then I must be gaining. It doesn't happen like that. All lose. Everybody loses because you are also gaining something by doing trade with them, right? You are also gaining some cheap products or some good products. So it affects the GDP of all the parties involved negatively. So that is political risk. Then IPR protection, very big issue, especially with countries that have poor enforcement of IPR rules. Uh, so I don't know how prevalent it was here in US, but back in India when I was growing up, uh, people who were not wealthy enough, like which was majority of the population at that time, we rarely used to go to watch movies in cinema halls or buy or original CDs or DVDs to watch. It was almost always pirated CDs, and when internet came, it was pirated movies and songs downloaded from pirated websites. So the piracy was very, very common, not just in entertainment, but even in other fields. Like you could find products having the logo of Nike or Apple or other Western firms freely being used, and nobody used to take any action against that. You know, you might have heard those websites like Torrent, you know, Jack's Movies or 123 Movies and those kind of websites, right? So, or a lot of piracy used to happen through Telegram as well. So that is a very big issue. Uh, Now piracy has reduced even in other parts of the world because of these OTT platforms and all. People, instead of hunting for each movie separately through websites which have risk of viruses, they generally tend to buy these subscriptions, and also because the earning capacity and spending capacity in these countries have increased a lot in the last 30 years. So piracy has reduced in countries like I see it reducing a lot in India and even I guess other countries as well. But yeah, still this IPR protection is a big issue with firms, especially Western firms, which are more used to strict enforcement of IPR. So that is also why they don't like going abroad, because they fear that their products will be copied and sold without them getting any revenues from it. Then other risks, security risks, of course. Security risks are not just terrorism risks or political turmoil risks. So when you hear the term security risk, you would think that, oh, it's are they talking about something like Syria or Iraq or Iran uh, or Russia? No, no, that's not the only thing that we are talking about. We are talking about other things as well. Like for example, which are the prominent social media platforms in the world?
Instagram and TikTok.
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter. And who owns these? Which country are these platforms of?
Most of
Almost
them.
all major social media platforms are American, right? Except TikTok, right? TikTok is Chinese, but other are all American. So what happens is that it has happened in many countries that if there are elections taking place, like suppose it was Venezuela last year, elections taking place. You can target ads, political parties can target ads, right? Now, US wants Machado to win. They want Nicolas Maduro to lose. What what would US government say to Meta and Snapchat and even Google or YouTube for that matter? That show ads, they have themselves accepted this, like that US government asks us to show targeted ads favoring the candidates that US government wants to win in those countries, and we have to comply because that's their home base, right? And that's probably one thing that you would say that CCP has done great in their country by insulating the country from. I mean, of course, there's other side to that argument as well. There are downsides of insulation as well, but that was the primary reason why CCP in China wants to have control over the social media and internet, right? So that is one risk with your complete IT infrastructure coming from outside. It's not just US. I'm sure if other countries, if this infrastructure was of Russia or Britain, they would do the same, right? Every country likes to flex and use its supremacy, hegemony, right? So that is one risk, that if your whole IT infrastructure, like literally 95% of the IT infrastructure in the world is American. If tomorrow there is an issue between US and India over some topic, you know, say US asks that you should support us in China is trying to take over Taiwan, India has to take sides, otherwise we will ask all the IT firms in the US to block, you know, Indian customers, then it's a hard choice, right? And that is what happened just 2 days ago in Iran as well. So Iran, for most of its part, has insulated itself from American companies, right? But some journalist or some protester in Iran yesterday or day before yesterday used Starlink to send videos out of Iran to Western media houses, Western journalists. Iranian government had blocked the internet and everything, right? Completely cut off the country. All the internet was blocked. There was no way for them to send any information outside Iran. But they used a Starlink. And what is Starlink? So Elon Musk firm, right? So I'm not going into the ethics or nitty-gritties of the discussion. I'm just giving an example that what does it mean by security risk for whatever perspective you want to see it from, right? So that is information security, digital interdependence, and regulatory complexity. Currency fluctuation is another big risk, very big risk. Let's take an example. I am an American firm. I have operations in Europe, in Britain, and my firm uh, earned £50,000 profit this year in UK, and I want to bring that profit to US, to my headquarters. First of all, which currency is stronger of the two, USD or Great Britain pound, GBP? Common knowledge question.
Like what's valued more?
Yeah, which is stronger? Yes,
I think the
valued more.
pound.
Yes. Huh?
I think the pound.
Yes, pound. Do you know the conversion rate as well?
Is it like 2 to 1?
No, it's about 1.1, 1.2. It fluctuates, but it's generally
Oh,
remains like,
is the euro 2 to 1?
no, even euro is not that
Oh,
high.
okay.
It's also the same, 1.2, 1.3, something like that. Uh, yeah, so when I when I was thinking about bringing the profits back to US from UK, at that time the conversion rate was 1 GBP to 1.2 USD. Okay, all right. But by the time I decided to click on that button, I took a few days of thinking. And by the time I decided to click on that button to bring the profit to, transfer the profit to US, USD became stronger. Now, first of all, first question is, tell me what does it mean by USD became stronger? Where would the arrow move from 1.2 towards 1.3 or towards 1.1?
Towards 1.1.
Anybody else? Yes, it would move to 1.1. USD become stronger means USD is more valued now against British pound. So it would move from 1.2 to 1.1. Yay, it's a good thing, right? I should be happy, right? My currency is getting stronger. Yes or no? I'm trying to bring
Yes.
profits to US. I'm just about to click on that button.
No, because the value of your money just decreased.
Yes, right? So earlier 50,000 pound would mean $60,000, right? It was 1.2, right? Conversion rate. Now it is 1.1. So my 50K pound would be $55,000. So it's bad news for me, even though my currency has become stronger. Honestly, people make a huge hue and cry of currency getting stronger or weaker, but it sounds that way that oh, becoming stronger is always a good thing, but it it depends on a lot of factors actually. It's not always stronger means good, getting weaker means bad, right? So currency fluctuation matters a lot, and hence that is another risk attached with internationalization. Cultural differences. Cultural differences, of course, uh, like for example, as written on the slide, work-life balance. East Asians are generally known to be workaholics. Work-life balance is very poor. Have you heard of 996? Have you heard the term 996?
Yeah,
Anybody?
it's like you start working at 9 a.m. And you end up working like 9 p.m. and for 6 days in a week.
Yes, yes. So that is a culture at many Chinese firms. 9 to 9, 6 days a week. Even Japanese are known to be workaholics. Even in India, the work-life balance is very poor in many firms. Of course, it varies from firm to firm as well, in China as well, in Japan as well. But they generally tend to be, the managers or the companies, they tend to be less empathetic towards the employees. While in US, work-life balance is better than Asian nations. But it's even better in European countries. I've heard from my friends in France and Germany. They always tell me that, they find American workplace culture very, more toxic and less people friendly. Like I've heard from many people in France that, if the office closes at 5, it closes at 5. You cannot stay even till 5:15 or 5:30. You have to go home. It's frowned upon, it's looked down upon if you work beyond your work hours. So cultural differences also matter a lot, and those cultural differences, it's not just work-life balance. Cultural differences can mean many more things. Uh, openness, or how formal or informal the culture is. So that can also result in many complexities and hindrance in transfer of knowledge from your subsidiaries to your home base. And yeah, that would also mean CSR, um, or um, ethical business, basically. So, like for example, tell me what are the top clothing producers in the world, like clothes manufacturing facilities or apparel manufacturing facilities in the world. I mean, by country ranking. Do you know which are the popular destinations for that?
Probably like, wait, you said by country?
Yes.
Like maybe China, Vietnam, Singapore.
Yeah, no, Singapore is very expensive. No.
Oh.
Yeah, China and Vietnam. Yes, China, then Bangladesh, and then Vietnam. Okay. So, what has happened in the past is that uh, many a times, like these Zara, Prada, and all these popular for Armani, all these firms, they outsource the manufacturing to these countries, right? But what has happened in Bangladesh and Vietnam, especially, uh, that the working conditions of these workers is very poor. Like 1,000 people crammed in a big hall under the same roof with very little space, and most of the times these workers are females. Okay, so they would have just 3 toilets for 1,000 people, uh, no breaks in between for 10 hours, no healthcare facilities or healthcare perks. And several incidents have happened in Bangladesh where the roof fell of the factory, of the manufacturing facility, and one time a few hundred people died, and one time over 1,000 people died because the infrastructure was so poor. So what happens is that uh, you know these firms, they outsource the manufacturing. So even though they did not intend that it should have happened, they did not know that the manufacturing facility was of the contractor was so poor. But the protests start happening in Western countries against these firms. In Europe and US, the protests would start happening against these firms, that you should be held accountable for what happened in Bangladesh or Vietnam or China, because you did not pay attention to what contractor you are subcontracting your manufacturing to. So you should audit it properly. You should pay more attention, that that the enforcement of the rules is proper in those countries where you are outsourcing your work, right? So that is another problem that these firms face. Then home state rules. Home state rules. So now, because anti-corruption, anti-bribery enforcement is much more stricter in Western countries like US, but it is very lax in other parts of the world. So what happens is, take for example, say there is a dam to be built in Cambodia, and firms from all over the world are bidding for it. So firms from Ghana are bidding, India are bidding, US are bidding, Europe are bidding, and taking or giving bribes is more accepted in Cambodia and Ghana than US. Okay. So this Ghanaian firm would go and pay bribe to Cambodian government and all the managers, the whole chain of approvals, that award the tender to us. And US firm, though more capable, though more they could have bid for at a lower price for a better quality, and they have more money which they could have paid for bribe as well. But they fear that if they get caught, even 5 years or 10 years down the line, there would be very strict action against them in their home country. So they might think twice before paying bribe. And US executives feel that it puts them at a disadvantage because they are more rule abiding. It does not give a level playing field just because they are being more upright or more law abiding as compared to other parts of the world. Does not mean that your US firms do not pay bribes. They do. Yeah, it happens. All in every country. It has happened in the past as well. and there have been, when they have got caught, there have been strict actions against them as well. But yeah, in general, US firms do this less as compared to other countries' firms, right? So that is another problem that US firms face when going abroad. Then Michael Porter is again in the picture, and he consistently tried increasing our syllabus and curriculum throughout his life by churning out more and more theories. So he gave something called diamond of competitive advantage, where he said or tried to explain that why a nation achieves international success in a particular industry. So, what makes a nation attractive for foreign firms to come and invest? So, first reason is factor endowments. Factor endowments are like generally considered three or four. Some people mention the first three, land, labor, and capital. Some mention the fourth component as well, which is entrepreneurship. That if a country has a lot of land, which would mean directly more resources, more natural resources, labor, that is cheap labor, capital, that is money, and entrepreneurship. So I'll give you examples. So land is, Russia is the biggest country in the world, right? Then I guess second is Canada, then US and China, something like that. So the bigger your country is, the more resources you have to use. You can just keep on building houses if nothing else, and even that would keep rolling your economy for some time, although it would result in ghost towns. But I'm just saying that land is a big resource, and land naturally means more natural resources as well, which will help your economy. Then cheap labor, like countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, many African countries, they have cheap labor through which they attract not just cheap labor. The labor could also mean educated labor. Like Vietnam is said to have one of the best schooling systems in the world, and that is why so many companies go to Vietnam, because they have really good educational level and very high skilled workers. Okay, then capital. So countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia is big, but countries like Kuwait, Qatar, Brunei, they do not have land, they do not have labor, they're not very educated, they do not have a big land, but they have capital through oil, right? So they are just filthy rich and they have a lot of money to spend. Look, have you heard of that project called The Line in Saudi Arabia, where they are trying to build like a 20-mile long city which would have every facility within its walls? It's like a crazy project, like more than trillion dollars worth of project. Why they can afford to spend that much money? Because they have a capital. That is how UAE is attracting so many. Like UAE is trying to project Dubai as the next financial capital of the world, right? Because they have the capital to build things and entrepreneurship. So, a country like Israel, which does not have land, does not have capital, but Israeli companies do well globally because they have really good startups. So, some of their tech firms and I guess pharma also, if I remember correctly, their startups are some of the best in the world. So they have really a culture of entrepreneurship. So all these factor endowments would make your country attractive for investment. Then demand conditions. Demand conditions is, of course, consumerism. Modern capitalism is completely based on consumerism. If there is no demand for products in your country, if there is no propensity to consume, then it won't be attractive for foreign companies to come. Then relating and supporting industries. Relating and supporting industries is yeah. So if I am an FMCG firm and if I want to go to Philippines, I should know that how good are their highways, how good is their air connectivity, train connectivity, for my products to be transported throughout the country. Are there supporting industries, right? And supporting industries could also mean that if I want to open a automobile manufacturing plant somewhere, does that country have good rubber industry for my tires and other like steel industry? So relating and supporting industry, like Detroit is famous for automobile manufacturing. So of course there would be a whole ecosystem of supporting and relating industry. Same in Silicon Valley, and it also happens vice versa. If automobile industry grows in your country, then it would directly result in growth of rubber industry as well. It would directly result in the growth of say steel industry as well. So it happens both ways, right? So that would also uh, define the attractiveness. Like for example, here in US, I see that when I travel through car, we generally cover like 60 to 70 miles easily on highways, which means like 100 kilometers in 1 hour. But in India, simply due to the quality of roads, um, I mean, nowadays roads have improved a lot, but back in the day, like even 50 to 60 kilometers was generally the case, 60, 70 kilometers, because quality of road plus following traffic rules and all those things. Um, I mean, traffic jams you find more. So all those things. So that hinders the transportation capabilities. And if something is getting transported from one end of the country to other via road, which happens many a times, long distance trucks, it can directly affect your final bottom line in terms of revenues and all, right? So having a good supporting industry is very important. Then rivalry. US is US because of the cutthroat competition it has. People may not like it, but that is also the USP of success of US, right? So the cutthroat competition that Silicon Valley has, NYC has, that is what results in attracting the best brains of the world. So uh, that also results in good strategies. Like OpenAI happened in US because US gave the incentive to innovate, and Google was forced to come up with Bard or Gemini within 3 months simply because of rivalry and firm strategy. So vigorous domestic rivalry creates pressure to innovate and improve quality, and that is what makes your economy attractive. So despite having a very strong currency, US still gets a lot of investment from abroad. Not because people want to save costs here. You cannot save cost in US. Things will be expensive for you if you want to open any facility here because the currency is so expensive, right? But still, it receives a lot of investment from abroad solely because of the rivalry and innovation, right? Then economic system of the country. Of course, uh, you might have seen rankings called ease of doing business rankings. Ease of doing business rankings consider a lot of factors like um, how quickly can you open business. Zoran Mamdani also said something on the same lines that he will cut down the number of approvals required to open small businesses, and he will reduce the paperwork. That is what he said, and that affects a country's attractiveness. So, like for example, say New Zealand. New Zealand is considered to be have very good ease of doing business. So if I today I think of starting a company, then all the approvals I need within 4 days I can start my company. So by next week Tuesday, I would be able to register and start my operations. That is how quickly it can get done in New Zealand. But take a country like India, where it has a lot of bureaucratic hurdles and red tapeism. It might take you months to get all the approvals, right? So that discourages you from pursuing those ideas, right? So, economic system of the country, how conducive, how friendly you are making, how easy you are making it for the firms to conduct their operations and start their operations, also defines the attractiveness of the country. And US is ranked 15th. Actually, this is not ease of doing business ranking. This is economically stable countries ranking. So it is different. I was talking about ease of doing business. Culture. Yeah, culture also matters a lot. And that is why firms in US especially like to rotate young managers all over the world in their different offices to train them for the top positions later in their career, where they can give a holistic view of the operations of the firm globally. So there was this researcher, Dutch researcher, Geert Hofstede. He studied more than 100,000 people in IBM's different offices, because IBM has offices all over the world. And he tried to identify the what are the different traits of people, of employees, which is because of their cultural background. So first dimension that he gave was power distance. Power distance basically means that so if someone is like 60 or 65 years old in US, I would still, and his name is James, I would still call him James, even though he is so elder to me. Even if he is my family member, I might still call him James, right? But if you are in other part of the world, um, then in many cultures, it's considered disrespectful to take name of elders. You have to either use a prefix or suffix, or you have to call them by some, you have to address them by some sign of respect, like uncle, auntie, or some word in the local language, depending on the relation that you have with that person. So you cannot take name, and and it's considered offensive to talk back or cut them in between when they are speaking, and those kind of things. So there is some power distance. So like here, if there is a senior manager in a meeting, very elder and very senior manager, I can still disagree. I can show it won't be even considered very courageous. I was gonna say that I can show the courage to disagree. I mean, it's considered normal to disagree with a senior person. But if you go to Asia or Africa, and other cultures, they don't like that if you are senior in post or age, they don't like being disagreed upon by juniors, right? So, like for example, here in US, we have tenure track system for academicians, professors. Do you know what is tenure track system? Have you heard the term before? Tenure track system is basically, you have to publish certain number of papers in certain quality of journals in the first 6 to 7 years to get a permanent job, and even after that, you have to keep publishing. right? So your job and your seniority depends on your quality of papers and basically your skills. But say in Japan or in India, once you get a job, it's a permanent job. You will get promotions automatically after a certain period of time. So, like for example, after 10 years, you will become associate professor. Then after 20 years, you will become full professor. It does not depend on how much you publish or anything. It just depends on your age. So that is like an example of power distance. Individualism versus collectivism. What do you think US is? Individualist country or collectivist country?
Individualist.
Yes, very individualist, right? Uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainty avoidance means uh like in many parts of the world, especially the countries which were colonies, uh, till my grandfather generation or even my parents generation, they never really encouraged entrepreneurship or opening a business. They always wanted their kids to pursue a government job, permanent stable job, uh, because the country did not those countries did not have many jobs at that time, and governments in many of those countries were communist socialist. uh, so undertaking entrepreneurship was considered very risky, and their main focus was parents main focus was that they should be able to provide their kids food and education. That is their top priority. So they wanted to avoid any uncertainty in their life, right? That has shaped their culture as well, even today's culture to a certain extent. While in countries like more stable countries like US and Europe, where you have some backing, that even if your startup fails or your company fails, you won't have to die of hunger. You can take the risk of entrepreneurship. So uncertainty avoidance is pretty high in those cultures versus Western cultures. Then masculinity versus femininity, I'll show on the next slide. Then long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Earlier, I used to see it through two ways. Long-term orientation and short-term orientation can mean two things. First is that because you are more entrepreneurial, like US, uh, so you are thinking about long-term success, so you want to take risk of starting a business. But the other way could be, which it actually means, is countries like Asian countries or African countries, um, they they want to avoid uncertainty because they are thinking long-term stability. So that is their long-term orientation could mean what it means in Asia, or long-term orientation could mean what it means for an entrepreneur in the West. But actually, the definition is, I guess, the Asian one. We will see that also in the next slide. So, indulgence versus restraint. Which societies are more indulgent? Say, if a society is more religious, would it be more indulgent, or would it have more restraint?
More restraint.
More restraint, right? So indulgence versus restraint. Although you also see Middle East sheikhs having the more the biggest luxuries of the world. But yeah, in general, Western societies are considered to be more indulgent, more free gratification, and there are more controls and restrictions in non-Western societies. So masculinity and femininity, basically, some traits that are associated with being masculine and feminine, like um feminine societies are, they tend to be more relationship oriented, and they're more empathetic because they have natural motherly instincts. That is why, in primary school teachers, you would find more females than males. I mean, there are many other reasons for that as well, but that is one of the reasons. Smaller gender wage gap, uh, less religious, um, because I mean they tend to see religion as controlling for females, and both men and women as priests. Then more environmentally sensitive. So those are the traits that he distributed in those two categories. Then long-term orientation and short-term orientation. So as I was saying, you know, these societies are more long-term oriented, and they have more emphasis on persistence, and they just classified these traits workaholism, relationships ordered by status. So as I mentioned, that hierarchy is more important in these countries, while hierarchy is not that important in Western societies. Then culture also changes, of course, like how women's participation in the labor force has increased um, in today's times. Then cultures also change due to convergence. I mean, like Japan, China, India. These many of these cities in these countries have very similar to Western culture now because of you know globalization, connectivity, and consuming the Western products, movies, and songs. Then there could be some counter trends as well, like as has happened in Afghanistan, or separatist movements in some countries. Then when you go abroad, there are three types of strategies you can adopt. One is global strategy. So global strategy would be uh, where you have the same strategy all over the world. Like if you are an oil producing company or even phone company like Apple, you don't need to customize your product according to different countries. You can sell the same product with the same strategy everywhere, right? But what about say restaurant chain or food companies? You cannot sell everything everywhere, right? So what would a restaurant chain be? Would it be multi-domestic, where you have um different strategy for different countries, or would it be transnational, where you have some global component but as well as some local component? How would you categorize a restaurant chain? Say
Mm,
McDonald's or Burger King. Hmm?
Transnational, I think. I mean,
Yeah,
I guess it
something.
also depends on the type of the restaurant, right? Because if you have
Right.
a fast food chain like Walmart, you would have to adapt the menu to different countries. For example, I guess the Muslim country, they don't eat certain kind of meat, so you'd have to
Right.
adapt it.
Right. Right. Somebody else was also saying something, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like a lot of countries, you have to consider like religious or dietary restrictions. So, maybe countries that are very like vegan in culture per se. like they won't have a lot of success having, fast food chains that sell, hamburgers, which are meat.
Mhm.
So you'd have to adapt in some way.
Right, right. So yeah, I feel that restaurant chain would be transnational. So there would be some global element, like if you go to Starbucks in China or Japan, you can find some products that you find in US as well, right? Uh, but maybe some products would be local as well to cater to local needs, local tastes, right? So yeah, as you guys said, there has to be some local element, but there would be some global element as well. So it depends on the industry, varies from industry to industry, right? And companies can have many different strategies elsewhere. Like the company could be pursuing differentiation strategy in one region, cost leadership in another region, or integrated strategy in some other regions. Possible to do that, and companies do that all the time. Choice of entry. Then, how do you want to enter? So let's say, I think I mentioned something called value to volume ratio yesterday. Value to volume ratio is, let's say, I have two products. One is diamonds and one is tennis balls. Okay. So uh, I have to go broad with these two items. So say I have to uh, go to South Africa. I have to send my products to South Africa. Should I undertake exporting or should I undertake FDI? That is, I go there and produce there. For which product should I pursue exporting? For which product should I pursue FDI? So, value to volume ratio, why I mention it here, 1 pound of diamonds, they may be millions of dollars worth. 1 pound of tennis balls, I don't know, like few hundred dollars maybe. I I I don't have any idea about how much a tennis ball costs. So if um I export tennis balls from US to South Africa, the transportation cost itself will add up so much to the final cost of the ball that it won't be a profit making entity. I should go and produce there. But if I transport diamonds through air mode, diamonds themselves cost millions of dollars. A few $1,000 worth of airline cost, flight cost won't add much to its final cost, right? So I can export. I don't need to undertake FDI. Do you get my point? Right? So how would you choose to enter a country would depend on many factors. One important factor is the industry you are in. If you are in tech and if you are in an industry where research matters a lot, like tech or pharma, you should not license or franchise. You should always either export or undertake FDI. Okay, because licensing and franchising has a big risk of leaking your technology, leaking your research. Right? If you give license to a firm, it can become your competitor in the future. So if you are a tech firm, or if you are a firm which has some tacit USP, you should either export or undertake FDI. Also, in licensing and franchising, you will have to share your profits. So that is another disadvantage, right? Uh, And despite all these, as I had mentioned in the first or second chapter as well, that throughout the semester we are going to see that most of the strategies fail, most of the M&As fail, international strategies fail, innovations fail, overall strategies fail. So it's very pessimistic that why are we studying strategy or making strategy in the first place if they are going to fail eventually. But that is how the world of business is. Then another reason why firms, ac- uh, use acquisition mode to enter a country is so there are both pros and cons of acquisition. Pro is that it's very fast, right? We saw in the previous chapter as well. If you have to enter a new market, it's very fast. It's the fastest mode. You can just acquire and then next day start operations. Plus, you get local employees who know local culture, who to bribe, who not to bribe, which language to speak, how to do marketing. You get local uh, capital, human capital, as well as um, financial capital as well. That you get their assets, their buildings, their manufacturing facilities, and all. But um if there is anticipation, if there is no, if there is not a good candidate available to acquire in that country. So what happens is that despite the attractiveness of acquisitions, whenever these companies from developed nations go to developing nations, many times they are not able to find good candidate for acquisition. That is, that firm should be capable enough to be acquired. If the employees of these firm are not good, if the technology they have in their factories are not good, then it's not worth acquiring them. And that is why, in most of the cases, firms from developed countries generally tend to go alone. That is, use greenfield route, wholly owned subsidiary rather than acquiring a local firm, right? Or and another way is joint venture. But in joint venture, there may be again risk of one leaking your capability, then that the other firm can go alone sometime in the future, or there could be a conflict in decision making. So that is why firms may choose acquisition or even greenfield route. You understand the difference between greenfield and brownfield? Greenfield is when you start from scratch. That is how the term came up. Greenfield, clearing greenfield, starting from scratch, building your own facility, building your own office. That is greenfield route. That is your wholly owned subsidiary. And brownfield is when there was already something present there. That is, there was already a firm and you just acquired it. So acquisition is brownfield, right? So that is the difference. And of course, in acquisitions as well, if there is big cultural distance between the countries, then it would result in less value creation. But greenfield is good because you are not able to find a good candidate for acquisition. You do not want to enter a joint venture with a local firm because of conflicts. But greenfield has problem that you will have to start from scratch. It will take time for you to build your facilities. It might take sometimes even years to build your manufacturing facility and offices, which will require a lot of capital. You will have to hire people, local people. If you acquire firm, you get people instantly, and they know how to hire best. The local people would know how to hire best. But here, you will have to go to a new culture and hire people not knowing their culture, which can be costly and time taking and risky as well. So that is why it's always advised that when you want to enter a country, first build a relationship with that country for a few years through exporting. That is, first export your product for a few years, know the country well, then decide which route to choose, whether you want to choose acquisition, whether you want to choose licensing, whether you want to choose greenfield, whether you want to choose joint venture. But first, build a relation with that country to exporting for a few years. Then, yeah, if it's a service industry, then you would want to choose people who have great personal skill, people to people skills, interpersonal skills, and greenfield you would choose when you don't want your technology to leak. So you won't enter joint venture, you won't license. You might even not choose acquisition because you don't trust the local firm to be good enough. So you might choose greenfield route because either your services are good, like uh, you want to ensure the best quality and you don't trust others' quality, so you would choose greenfield venture. Then, what does research suggest about international expansion? So, research shows this is the loss actually. So, research says that as international diversification increases, a firm's returns decrease initially, but then increase quickly. What does it mean? That initially your returns would be decrease. Your returns would decrease because it would take some initial investment, initial capital, to understand the local market. Then they would start increasing because you have learned how to sell your product in the new market. But then if you diversify too much geographically, then they would reach a peak and then they would eventually become negative again. So two U's, first U and then inverted U, which would make it a S type, like an inclined S, 90-degree S, right? That is what early research has demonstrated. That too much diversification can make it difficult to manage, too complex structure. But you should diversify for sure. You should enter other areas. So what happened? Mm, So yeah, does that mean that we should? That was in early research, but then later research showed that there is no relation between multinationality and performance. So does that mean that we should not diversify? No, we should diversify, but it would depend on your industry and a lot of other factors as well. So yes, and these firms, especially Western firms, American firms, when they see potential in young managers, like suppose Robert is well read, you know, they see great potential that Robert can become a really successful manager in the future. So they generally tend to groom young managers, and they generally tend to send them on offshore, onshore. I mean, offshore for us, onshore, on-site projects to different nations, so that if young managers have great experience globally, then when they reach vice president and that kind of position in their 40s and 50s, then they would have bird's eye view of how the operations work. While in countries like Japan, um, the culture that they have in that side of the world, they would send only senior manager to such important positions. And there have been incidents like, for example, if there is a very important deal to take place between a US firm and Japanese firm, then US firm sends some young manager who they see a lot of potential in. That yeah, he's skilled enough, he's good enough, he can handle the deal. He has great eloquence, oratory skills. But Japanese firm, because it's an important deal, Japanese firm sent a 55-year-old senior manager. And when that manager sees that, oh, this young lad, this American firm has sent a 25-year-old guy, I think they are not serious about this deal. I think they are not taking this business seriously. They might feel offended that, otherwise they would have sent some very senior guy from the firm. So that is how cultural differences can affect international meetings. And like it's said that in Chinese firms, the first business meeting they won't even talk about business; they would just want to know you more. While some Western firms would like to come directly to the point. Oh, we have come here for business, so we should talk about business. That's it. I don't know to know you personally, but yeah, it's always great to have a diverse team from diverse backgrounds in your top management, because then they would understand your global operations well and better than a person who does not have global experience. Either you should have global experience or you should have some cultural background, different cultural background, so you can give advice to the top management. So this was it. This was pretty long. As I said, the last 3 or 4 chapters are very long. Uh, but CSR is very small, so it's the shortest chapter. And cooperative is also not that long, actually. So governance one is long. Corporate governance is long, but it's also very important. All right. So we meet next week. If you have something to talk about, you can stay. Otherwise, tata, bye bye. See you.